closed for business. More universities, school districts, and churches are shutting down to stop the spread of the coronavirus. Finding a political deal. The White House and lawmakers try to agree on spending to combat the virus. Retaliation in Iraq. The U.S. bombs an Iranian-backed militia after rockets killed Americans. And celebrating an anniversary. It's been 7 years since Pope Francis was elected as the Bishop of Rome. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, March 13th, 2020. Good evening, and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. President Donald Trump declares a national emergency. This new declaration will unleash more federal help in order to combat the coronavirus. White House correspondent Owen Jensen begins our team coverage tonight. Owen.
Good evening, Tracy. The president made the historic announcement this afternoon from the White House and the Rose Garden. Now he's already taken unprecedented steps to stop the virus. Here's what he had to say.
The spirit and the will of our nation is unbreakable. We will defeat this threat when America's tested America rises to the occasion. And to those families and citizens who are worried and concerned for themselves and their loved ones, I want you to know that your federal government will unleash every authority, resource, and tool at its disposal to safeguard the lives and health of our people.
So there you have it, a national emergency declared. Meanwhile, efforts continue to contain the fallout.
At the White House, the Treasury Secretary offering his advice to people worried about their retirement savings.
Well, my comment is don't stare at the screen, okay? It'll be higher a year from now.
He also said the president's very interested in a payroll tax cut, predicted gas would be cheaper, and is perfectly comfortable getting on a commercial plane. As for interest rates...
Mr. Secretary, do you agree that interest rates need to be lowered?
I'm not going to comment on interest rates. What I would comment is interest rates have come down a lot, okay? The Fed has injected a lot of liquidity.
Today, stocks battle back. The Treasury Secretary putting a positive spin on the virus that's been wreaking havoc on people's health and pocketbooks.
People are shopping. From the data I have from the credit card companies, what we've seen is, although travel spending is way down, spending on supplies, food, medical, pharmacy has almost offset that in the short term.
There's no question people are shopping. In L.A., grocery store shelves grew bare amid fears of the coronavirus. Meanwhile, speaking at the White House last night, Dr. Anthony Fauci with the National Institutes of Health says the government is working with commercial labs to make coronavirus tests much more widely available.
It's not going to be months, it's going to be a week or so, where you're going to get many, many more tests that are going to be available.
Dr. Fauci also defends the unprecedented actions to limit the spread of the virus.
And someone might say, well, are you overreacting? We got to lose that. We got to start looking at doing things now.
And on Monday, the president will hold a video conference with the G7, the top economic powers in the world, to discuss progress being made against the coronavirus. Tracy?
Correspondent Owen Jensen reporting tonight from the White House. Thank you, Owen. Well, House Democrats and Republicans strike a deal regarding the coronavirus aid bill. It includes free testing for COVID-19, as well as paid sick leave for those suffering from the virus. But House and Senate Republicans aren't happy. They say House Speaker Nancy Pelosi tried to smuggle pro-abortion funding into the original bill. Correspondent Eric Rosales reports from Capitol Hill now. Eric?
Well, Tracy, Republican lawmakers I spoke with say that the actions of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi are, quote, repulsive. They say that Speaker Pelosi tried to lobby for several provisions, including up to $1 billion to reimburse abortion labs using federal funds.
It's political. It's, you know, it's really quite disgusting, quite frankly.
Arizona Republican Congresswoman Debbie Lesko says House Speaker Nancy Pelosi sought to include a potential way to guarantee federal funding for abortions into the coronavirus economic stimulus plan.
Speaker Pelosi and the leadership of the Democrat Party are trying to take advantage of a crisis like coronavirus.
People are dying.
Yeah, there's people dying, there's people getting sick, And we need to be serious about this. This is above politics.
Representative Lesko confirms one was a mandate for up to $1 billion to reimburse laboratory claims, which she adds would set a dangerous precedent of health spending without protections outlined in the Hyde Amendment. The Hyde Amendment blocks clinics that perform abortions from receiving federal funding. Democrats have pushed the Trump administration to end it since he was elected in 2016. And that's not all.
Not only pro-abortion provisions, but pet projects that Democrats have been wanting to pass for years, and they thought, okay, this is our chance. Let's get it in here.
Lawmakers say the Hyde Amendment provision was eventually removed from the stimulus bill. Republican Senator Ben Sasse from Nebraska issued this statement to EWTN. While schools are closing and hospitals are gearing up, Speaker Pelosi is waging unnecessary culture wars. Speaker Pelosi should be fighting the coronavirus pandemic, not politicizing emergency funding by fighting against the bipartisan Hyde Amendment. Sasse went on to state we need to be ramping up our diagnostic testing, not waging culture wars at the behest of Planned Parenthood. Good grief. It's important to note that EWTN tried to get a comment from the House Speaker's office. Our phone calls and emails were not returned. Meanwhile, if and when a deal is reached, it will then head off to the Senate next week. And as we heard from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, senators will be there to vote on it. Tracy?
Thank you, Eric. Correspondent Eric Rosales reporting from Capitol Hill. With church closures across the country, Catholics are seeing the widespread impact of the coronavirus, including right here in the nation's capital, where public masses have been suspended. Correspondent Mark Irons joins us now in the studio with more. Mark?
Tracy, if they haven't already, many Catholics are going to experience the disruption caused by the virus as soon as this weekend. In some parts of the U.S., Catholics will not be able to attend Sunday Mass. In places around the country, from New Jersey to Chicago to Seattle, we're seeing churches close their doors and suspend public masses. Though some Catholics may not be able to attend their usual service, the Archbishop of Seattle assures parishioners, despite the empty pews, priests will continue to celebrate Mass.
Every priest has an obligation to celebrate the Eucharist every day, and certainly I want our priests to continue to do that.
In the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, the church doors will remain open, but Archbishop Jose Gomez is relieving nearly 5 million Catholics of their Sunday obligation to attend Mass for the next 3 weekends. Church leaders across the country are telling those who are sick to just stay home. In Louisville, Kentucky, Archbishop Joseph Kurtz has yet to suspend public masses, but in a statement says, "I want individuals who feel vulnerable, especially senior citizens or those with underlying health conditions, to know that they are not obligated to attend Sunday Mass." Inside many churches, you'll find empty holy water fonts, and with Catholic school closures, empty hallways. Karen Bittner, a Catholic from Pittsburgh, has found a way to practice prayerful cleanliness.
I have figured out that a Hail Mary is actually 30 seconds, so I'm praying a Hail Mary for protection from the coronavirus every time I wash my hands.
Many Catholic churches have suspended the reception of communion wine and the sign of peace, typically shared with a handshake. But Bittner says she will continue to go to Mass if she is able.
It's not changing the way I feel about coming to church. I think that coming to church is very important, and as long as there's Mass, I will come.
And starting tomorrow, the largest Catholic church in North America, the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception here in D.C., is suspending the public celebration of Mass. Tracy, its doors will remain open so people can go in for private prayer.
Okay, thank you so much, Mark. Correspondent Mark Irons reporting for us tonight. Thanks again. And coming up later in the show, advice for the faithful on how to stay connected to God and when going to church is not possible. Some churches in Rome reopened for private prayer only. Yesterday, the Diocese of Rome said all churches would be closed to the public. Today, the Vicar General of Rome now says it will be up to each priest to determine whether to leave churches open. He also provided a dispensation in the diocese of the Sunday obligation to attend Mass. There are nearly 200 confirmed cases of the coronavirus in Lazio. That's the region surrounding Rome. Dr. Elizabeth Lev, art historian and author, joins us now from Rome. Liz, thanks for being with us. I know that you've been living in Rome for the past 30 years or so. What has your experience been like, and how has life changed during this coronavirus outbreak?
Well, when I think of one of the things that brought me to live in Rome was the fact that I could walk out of the library, walk out my door, and go inside a church or go see something beautiful all the time. It's been really quite a surprise to first watch all the museums get closed, and then the churches got closed, and then we can't even leave our houses. So it's been a bit of a rethink there for a second.
Yeah, I know you teach art classes to American students who are living abroad and then regularly give tours around the city. How does the inability to see live art, how does it affect your students and basically society?
It's a really good question. As a matter of fact, part of what makes this program and makes these programs of students abroad so important is that we get to show them art in situ. And you can imagine how important that is, especially when you're taking Catholic schools to see these Catholic sites and see the way a Caravaggio works in space and why the placement of the tomb of Peter and Michelangelo's dome. So the actual physically being there is a huge part of this. And then to have the students start a journey where they're getting used to seeing art in situ and then they have to go home, the new challenge, and if you will, this is an old dog that's got to learn a new trick. The real challenge is how to bring Rome to them. As a matter of fact, before the lockdown started, my RA and I were running around taking pictures and filming as much as we could so we'd be able to bring as much as we can of the city to our students.
Yeah, I guess you have about 3 weeks to go in Rome before the lockdown's lifted. What helps to motivate you to stay positive during this time? Because I'm sure it can be pretty frustrating.
It's wildly frustrating, but I keep thinking it's mighty fortunate that it happened during the period of Lent, right? So in a certain sense, I've gone full Lenten purple at this point. But I think in a certain sense, it really does help to understand, it helps us understand what it was like for Jesus in the desert. I keep finding these meditations very helpful, and particularly the Virgin Mary. But the other great joy of being in Italy is whether or not we can get to their churches, the amount of saints that have walked up and down this peninsula in plagues and occupations and disasters, you name it. If we can't walk in footsteps that are so clearly laid out for us, then, who are we?
Yeah, Liz, thank you for that positivity and also time for reflection. It seems like when the ban is lifted and you're able to go out there freely again, is there one museum you're going to visit first?
Beeline for St. Peter's. I miss St. Peter's. I can see it and I can't get there, so I miss it a great deal.
Okay, well, that's wonderful to hear, and thanks for talking with us. We're thinking and praying for all of you there. Dr. Elizabeth Lev, art historian and author. Thanks again, Liz.
Thank you.
Well, the Pentagon launches airstrikes in Iraq on a Shiite militia that's backed by Iran. The bombing by U.S. fighter jets hits 5 weapons storage facilities north of Baghdad. It marks a major escalation in tensions between the U.S. and Iran. 6 Iraqis died in the airstrikes, which were in response to a rocket attack that killed 2 Americans and a British soldier. U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper says the United States will not tolerate attacks against Americans. The first woman president of Greece gets sworn in to chants of the Greek Archbishop. Orthodox priests and the Archbishop of Athens were on hand in the Greek parliament, but some lawmakers skipped the swearing-in ceremony due to worries of the coronavirus. 63-year-old Katerina Sakiropoulou took oath of office, placing her hand on a Bible. She's a former high court judge and was overwhelmingly elected by Parliament 2 months ago. Coming up, with the coronavirus forcing cancellation of Mass in some parts of the world, how do Catholics cope in this season of Lent? Lawmakers in Utah approve a new pro-life law that bans most abortions if the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade. Last year, Utah banned abortions after 18 weeks, but that law was blocked amid legal challenges. The Supreme Court is currently considering abortion laws in a few other states. Today, the World Health Organization announced that it has received reports of more than 132,000 cases of COVID-19 around the world. 5,000 people have died so far due to the virus. This as the European Union urges its member countries to put health screening procedures in place at their borders to limit the spread of the coronavirus. More than 22,000 cases of COVID-19 have been confirmed across Europe, now named the epicenter of the pandemic by the World Health Organization. Joining us now to talk about the impact the coronavirus is having here in our country is Dr. Christie, Senior Policy Advisor with the Catholic Association and a practicing radiologist. She joins me now by Skype. Grazie, welcome back and great to see you.
Thank you, Tracy, for having me.
Well, in Florida, as one of the many states affected by the coronavirus, what are you seeing there in Miami?
Well, there's an air of panic, which is sad to panic, but we do have to take things very seriously. People are stocking up and starting to think about their children not being in school next week. Most of the schools are being canceled effective Monday. This is going to be a serious blow to take care of the children and keep them indoors. And what we're facing it strong and brave, the same way the rest of the country is doing it.
Can you talk a little bit about how the virus is impacting the elderly and those who may be immunocompromised or have other health conditions?
Well, as I think all of us know by now, that the elderly and those who have other chronic illnesses or immune compromised are especially susceptible to the illness, to having the acute respiratory infection part of the illness that does land you in the hospital and can be very serious. So elderly and chronically ill people need to be especially careful to stay out of crowds and maybe should start thinking about staying home entirely, and always to keep in mind that any symptoms they should check with their doctor. Recently, a lot of telemedicine restrictions have been lifted and people are going to be able to access a lot of telemedicine that they weren't before, and this is going to be very helpful.
Grazie, I've been hearing a lot about how it impacts the lungs and pneumonia. Can you explain that a little bit more and why that's so concerning?
Well, it's very concerning because it causes an acute respiratory distress. The lungs where the oxygen is exchanged now between the air that we breathe and our blood. The lungs get full of liquid, and the patient basically has a lot of difficulty breathing. In the ICU, they're able to support the breathing with oxygen, and many patients survive even when they have this very serious response. So it's very important to watch for any symptoms, especially shortness of breath, cough, fever, but once you start feeling short of breath, you really need to reach out to your doctor and maybe make your way to the emergency room.
We've also been hearing a lot about washing our hands and using hand sanitizer. Can you talk about, from a medical perspective, best practices and why those are important?
Well, I think what's important is for every one of us to remember that we each need to take a role in fighting the spread of infection. Everybody can stop shaking hands. In Miami, we can stop kissing. And everybody needs to practice that hand hygiene. Wash your hands continuously, all the time. Do not touch your hands to your mouth. That is the biggest way that we spread the virus to ourselves, from surfaces. And everybody who suspects they might be ill, who suspects they might have a fever, who has a cough, needs to stay away from others, because you could be transmitting the infection even if you only have a light case.
A lot of people are also stocking up on food and water. What about prescription medications? Should we do that as well?
Anything that's going to take you out of the house in order to make that shopping trip, that is something you should probably think about stocking up on. Medications, I hope will not be affected as far as the distribution of medications, the supply chain. But if you are on a medication that you need to take every single day, you might want to get that in advance and not have to be making constant trips to CVS or to the local pharmacy the way that all of us do.
Yeah.
So do think about what you're going to need every day, and if you can stock up, do so.
Really good advice. Quickly before we go, though, I do want to ask you this. You're a doctor. I know that you're a mom. For us parents, what should we keep in mind when talking to our kids who maybe are having a hard time with this and making sense of it all?
I think that we should concentrate on the fact that we live in a wonderful country where all of us are going to work hard together along with the government, the private sector, a really wonderful medical system that we have, and we're going to take care of each other and all of our sick, and keep hope and faith alive. Help each other with our faith also. This is the time to build our faith, to help our friends and family strengthen their faith. And remember that we're never alone, even in the most serious crises.
Absolutely. Grazie, thank you so much. Thank you for saying that. Dr. Grazie Christie, Senior Policy Advisor with the Catholic Association. Thanks again, Grazie.
Thank you.
Up next, the Holy Father offers his daily Mass to church pastors around the world. And we'll take you back 7 years ago today to the election of Pope Francis. Pope Francis offers his Mass this morning for pastors around the world, saying he hopes they will accompany their flock during the coronavirus.
Che Dio si è fatto dono Lui stesso per noi.
The Holy Father says God made himself as a gift to all of us. It is meant to be shared with others. When we forget about that and instead try to turn God's love and help into our own personal possession, it is a very grave sin. The season of Lent is generally one that unites the faithful in the communal experience of attending Mass. But with the spread of the coronavirus and the changes to, and in some instances, the cancellations of public Mass, our spiritual lives have become yet another area impacted by the global pandemic. Joining me now by Skype to talk about how we as Catholics can maintain and strengthen our spiritual connection during these challenging times is Msgr. Charles Pope of the Archdiocese of Washington. Msgr, welcome back. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Msgr, in the season of Lent, how can we as Catholics stay connected and maintain that sense of faith and community if we can't attend Mass?
Yeah, I mean, the liturgy is our life, isn't it? Yeah, and it's a very serious blow to some of us that we can't, even for me as a pastor, to not be able to be with my people this weekend. But I will say this much, that we have to remember that maybe in times like these we can be creative. You know, certainly the Mass is available at EWTN. We have the Mass is broadcast. Likewise, at the Basilica, we have a half-hour version of the Mass, and I'm going to try to do a little bit of live streaming. Maybe do a homily and post it this weekend. I'm going to work on the technology for that. But I will say that obviously try to do the readings certainly at home. You can always do those on your own at home, and there may be provisions in certain dioceses where maybe public masses have been canceled, but the pastor is able to give communion out on as people come by during the week. You check that out with your diocese. I'm still not even sure here in Washington what we're going to be able to do with that. Can people still come by and receive communion at certain times? These things haven't been worked out yet.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that we're dealing with. Excuse me. As a pastor, how are you dealing with the issues of religious education and those in RCIA?
Yeah, well, right now, again, we're not forbidden from having other meetings, so we still can do some of that. On the other hand, we tend to have these on Sunday between the Mass and Sunday school. So it's a little bit of a challenge for us, but we might, just because it's so important these last few weeks of Lent to work with our catechumens and candidates, we might try to meet with them at other times. And again, I'm awaiting, these kinds of things from our archdiocese where there have been limits put on the Mass, but maybe not other things. So we're not sure yet.
I know you kind of mentioned this before, but as we all know, no Mass means no Holy Communion. Can you walk us through the process of a spiritual communion and how we can put that into practice?
Yeah, spiritual communion is that we take time and we in a way, it can be a very beautiful thing because it really indicates a longing for communion. Sometimes when it's always available, but when we know it's not available, suddenly we can say, Lord, I really long, I miss receiving you. And I long to receive you. And it's even just saying something that similar or that simple is a way to simply say, Lord, I make this spiritual communion come into my heart. You have many other ways to reach me and feed me. And Lord, I trust you. I love you. And more than ever, I need you now.
Yeah. Msgr, what would you tell your parishioners who may be worried during this time?
Well, here I run into a little bit of a problem because I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not worried about this, and I think that we're a little bit worked up right now about something that has a very low risk for most people. Most of us aren't going to get sick. Most of us, a very small number. And look, when it's my time to go, take me, Lord. Maximum promotion, I hope. Go home, be with Jesus. But maybe through purgatory. But I'll get there. But I would say, don't worry. And I know that sounds terrible and trite, but the chances of really getting deeply sick, unless you're very sick already or somewhat elderly and have other issues, is very, very low. And I think we're talking about a real abundance of caution here. And I do think that we should remember you're not likely to get very sick. So again, but all the disclaimers, Tracy, I'm not an epidemiologist.
That I know, but you do offer a lot of spiritual help to a lot of people. So any other, last words about this, what's going on right now? Any thoughts for our viewers?
I wept last night when I heard I couldn't have Mass, and I just want my people to know, and I want everyone on EWTN to know I love you very much, and I'm going to very deeply miss gathering with the liturgy. But maybe it's a good reminder how precious and beautiful the liturgy is. I was crying. I was very deeply saddened. And but I love God's people, and I'm going to miss them this weekend.
Monsignor Charles Pope of the Archdiocese of Washington and co-host of Morning Glory on EWTN Radio.
Bless you. Thank you.
And just a reminder, you can watch daily and Sunday Mass right here on EWTN on weekdays and Saturdays. Mass is broadcast at 8 a.m., noon, and 7 p.m. Eastern. On Sundays, Mass is at 8 a.m. and noon Eastern. Check out EWTN.com for other times. And finally tonight, today is the 7th anniversary of the election of Pope Francis.
Padre nostro che sei nei cieli, sia santificato il tuo nome.
The Holy Father leading crowds in the Lord's Prayer back on March 13th, 2013. It was the first time we got a glimpse of the new Pope. Earlier today, President Donald Trump congratulated the Holy Father, writing, quote, "I am honored to congratulate you upon the 7th anniversary of your election to the chair of St. Peter." And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. We'll be back on Monday with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night and God bless.